understand that he can go much faster with a third land or another draw spell. Still, though, I don't know. That's the best theory up to this point, which I think that one probably makes the most sense.
So Darren Emery says at the end of game 1 of the Dredge matchup, wouldn't Dan Walton still get 4 zombie tokens from the Putrid Imp? What happened was Putrid Imp, he had sacrificed it to Cabal Therapy, and then in response, Daniel Signorini cast Snuff Out on his own Tarmogoyf. No. So what happens there
Bridge from below is what's called, I believe, an intervening if.
Exactly. Is that correct? Yes.
So, as a judge yourself, how does that work?
The ability says when a creature is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, if Bridge from Below is on in the graveyard, exile Bridge from Below. And then the other ability says basically the same thing.
So those triggers, because what he's saying is he's right. Those 4 triggers, they do go on the stack.
Right.
But each of those triggers, when it resolves, has this thing that says if it's in the graveyard. And because it's not there anymore.
It's no longer in the graveyard, the ability doesn't do anything anymore.
Right. It resolves, but it doesn't give him zombies.
Alright, so Shaheen Soorani is up a game here. We're going to game 2. Braun Duin with the bug control. Gonna be on the play. And here we go. Taking a look at the opening hand.
All right, so both players, we know that their game 1 decks, they probably, in what ways do they get slower game 2? And really in this matchup, that's
even slower?
I would imagine so. The most aggro thing, so Shaheen, I would say, is the one who's forced into the aggro role in this matchup, as much as that can be said, because of the power of Stoneforge Mystic. It becomes probably the most aggressive card that either person is playing, and is the one game that can put Shaheen more in control of the game. Braun Duin's cards a little more late game oriented. Out of the board, they will likely both be playing now cards like, well, we see Sword of Feast and Famine in Shaheen Soorani's board. Not a terrible one against a black-green deck.
So Shaheen, they both start out with Underground Sea. Shaheen on his first turn goes Inquisition of Kozilek. Braun Duin responds with Brainstorm to hide some of his cheaper cards.
Yeah, the question is, I mean, if he only has 2 cheap cards, it's really good. I think he has more than that. Yeah, Shaheen will still get equity on it. The only card he left was Snapcaster Mage, and Braun.
And 5 lands.
This is the kind of thing where Braun is completely positive this game's going to go late. If you'd keep 5 lands, I think he's keep his.
He had Brainstorm.
I think the cards he put back are 2 Brainstorms.
Well, he may have started off, with just like 3 Brainstorms and 4 lands.
Yep, and he's going to Wasteland there. And yeah, Shaheen, now looking at Cabal Therapy in his hand, has to be kind of upset with the card. It's not really. Boy, Braun sure has a lot of lands.
Basic Islands.
Yep, so second Brainstorm from Braun Duin. He'll play a fetch land, uncracked. He's going to try to use that to basically A-call with this Brainstorm. Shaheen on the basic to avoid Wasteland. Interestingly enough, Shaheen has Stoneforge Mystic, but opts not to play it here.
So
he's playing around. Yeah, he doesn't have a way to protect it from it. I suppose being counterspell proper, that is. So he's just going to wait. He realizes just how important the Stoneforge Mystic is. One thing that you can say about Shaheen is that he is a very patient player. Especially when you watch him play, things like most players who would slam a turn 2 Stoneforge Mystic. Shaheen's very okay waiting a long time for.
Well, and he knows this matchup, and he had Cabal Therapy in his hand, so he wanted to set up a turn where he can use the Cabal Therapy to clear out what he suspects might be a counterspell, or just get a look.
So Shaheen counterspelling the first Brainstorm from Braun Duin. Maybe with a counterspell for the second Brainstorm as well. Remember, Braun had a 5-land hand where he hid 2 Brainstorms on the top of the deck. And whatever Shaheen named, I don't think it was one of the cards in Braun's hand.
Yeah, he may have named something like Daze there.
I would say that maybe Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Oh wait, this is not a Daze deck.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. So
he probably I would have named Jace the Mind Sculptor there. It's a card he really, if he doesn't have another counterspell, that's a card he can't afford to let resolve.
But seeing the coast is clear, Shaheen Gets his Stoneforge Mystic.
Yep, so
Gets a
Brian,
Batterskull.
Brian, he saw that checklist card, which is a Garruk Relentless in Brian's hand. Garruk will be able to fight down that Stoneforge Mystic.
So the Cabal Therapy did name Jace the Mind Sculptor, as you said, Matthias.
Yep.
That's one of the scariest cards, and if you'd naturally drawn it, you would want to get rid of it before turn 4.
Neither player with a great answer to resolve Jace the Mind Sculptor outside of their own Jace the Mind Sculptor. I think it's the one card that no one can really love. If one player resolves that card, that is the trump in this matchup.
Respect the Jace.
Yeah. Shaheen has 1 Vindicate. And that is the only removal spell that either of these 2 decks are playing that gets it.
Okay, here comes Mr. Relentless. Most likely.
Very possibly, yeah. If Shaheen named Jace, Brian may have the read that Shaheen
has his own Jace.
Well, Shaheen doesn't have a Daze or another counter spell. But yeah, Shaheen he'd have to worry that Shaheen has his own Jace. On the other hand, Brian doesn't actually have an answer if Shaheen chooses to slam his own Jace anyway. So he's gonna go ahead and play Garruk, fight the Stoneforge Mystic before it can get anything, use its ability, and
Garruk Relentless transforms into Garruk the Veil Cursed.
Right, now so Garruk acquired the Veil Curse from Liliana, you see, and that, when he did so, yeah, making Death Touch tokens, the -2 ability, not too strong here. So Lingering Souls from Shaheen, and he used the Flashback on Cabal Therapy, I believe, to take out the Brainstorm. So yeah, Garruk the Veil Cursed in play for Brian.
So it can make 1/1 black wolf creature tokens with Death Touch.
Right, so Lingering Souls, yeah, a 3 of in Shaheen's deck. And he does have the 1 intuition to go find them.
Braun Duin fires back a Cabal Therapy. Shaheen says, all I have are lands.
Yep, a Thoughtseize.
Or sorry, yeah, Thoughtseize.
Right now, Brian needs an answer to Lingering Souls. Lingering Souls will actually be able to take care of Garruk.
Does anyone have a black Death Touch wolf token? I think that's what's going on here.
No, right now, actually, we're very safe. If Brian's named a Curse of Death's Hold, which he obviously doesn't have, but would be really strong here as long as
there it is.
I like that we're playing with all standard cards on the battlefield right now. So draw step. Okay, now we're out of standard cards. Well, I was excluding the lands.
Look at that black wolf with Death Touch. Where did that come from? We just have those. We knew Garruk would be played here.
Yeah. We have all sorts of tokens.
That is fantastic. Yeah, Shaheen's like, okay, so what do these other abilities do?
Right.
The -1, sacrifice a creature. If you do, search your library for a creature card.
Yeah, remember Brian, the only creatures he has are Deathrite and Snapcaster. He has V-Click exposed board, maybe Tarmogoyf exposed board. Nothing that scary. With that ability in the stack, Shaheen's going to Swords the V-Click. And yep, still has those 2 lands. So V-Click's ability does not do, resolves, doesn't do anything.
The Spirit token attacks Garruk, putting it down to 2 loyalty.
And Shaheen using up the last of his graveyard to make 2 more Lingering Souls.
So now, even if BVD +1's Garruk, the Spirit tokens are going to take him out. So he's going to attack with this wolf token.
And then he's going
to sacrifice it.
Sacrifice it to go get probably Deathrite or Snapcaster. I think right now it's hard to say. I think Snapcaster is better because he can snap this Brainstorm and then use that to just, trade it with the fetch line. You can basically shuffle away the cards in his hand which he doesn't want.
Yeah, that's not bad. Both players here living off the top of their deck, so getting a Brainstorm is getting 3 top of the decks.
The dream is that Brian could do that and then resolve it, like maybe find a Jace and resolve it. Lingering Souls, though, remember, is such a powerful card in this matchup. Yep, so Snapcaster on Brainstorm will happen. Brian draws another land, and another land. So,
I guess he's going to activate that fetch land.
It seems likely.
But he also wants to double check and make sure which land does he want. One of them's
Wasteland. One is a Creeping Tar Pit. So I think those ones with the most utility will probably see both those get kept.
Creeping Tarpit is
Yep,
not
Creeping
bad.
Tarpit is a one of in Brian's deck. I think it's part of his even more of his inevitability package because he has the life from the loam with it.
It's the Jace killer.
Yep. So now he's way less scared of an opposing Jace. So Shaheen doesn't need a Snapcaster to Brainstorm. He'll just draw a Brainstorm. And he hits a land, and an Engineered Explosives.
Okay, so the explosives is a little better.
The difference here is that Shaheen did not hit a fetch land.
Right.
But no, so he has one in play. I apologize. So so both of them essentially get to do a draw 3, and both of them really brick on their draw 3s.
Both forced to use their fetch lands here. Garruk is going to die. Shaheen sends 2 of them at Garruk just in case of Abrupt Decay or Dark Blast. And he's dead.
Now,
And now what?
well, I mean, Shaheen with both players will just kind of be hitting back and forth. Brian actually with both hitting for 3. So it's really whoever can draw out of this first. I guess I'll just go slightly to Brian because Brian gets to draw first.
They both cracked their fetch lands. Oh no, Shaheen has not cracked his
he will,
fully
just not,
deducted.
just not yet.
He moved like he was going to.
I mean, he certainly doesn't want to keep those cards on top of the stack.
No. And the Creeping Tarpit here. The singleton.
Well, yeah, I really like the
Creeping
card here.
Tarpit.
It means that Shaheen has to be very careful about when he casts a Jace. Right now, were Brian to resolve, I guess because of the Lingering Soul token, Brian can't particularly resolve a Jace right now either. Yeah, no one with a great answer. I think maybe if Brian found his Dark Blast, that would be a pretty strong play. I don't know if I'm not sure if he still left it in. I don't know if he could have boarded in Dark Blast. He has 3 Engineered Plagues in his board. If he does actually test his matchup and find that Lingering Souls is a problem, it's not inconceivable that he would have boarded in Lingering, Engineered Plague just for Spirit.
BVD activates Creeping Tarpit and attacks Shaheen for 3. 3/2 unblockable. Plays another Misty Rainforest and passes the turn.
Alright, so. And that fetch line cracked on step for Shaheen and Soorani. Both players basically playing off a fresh deck. We know that Brian's draw for the turn was a fetch land. Because his last card, I believe the last card he kept was the Wasteland.
Yeah, so he plays the Misty Rainforest.
Right. In this case, the only reason to hang on to a land would be if you draw a Jace. You may want to have 2 dead cards in your hand so you can actually draw 3 off the Jace. That's a fairly corner case, but that would be the only reason I think to not be to not just still be playing more cards. If Brian Brandon is kept in Raven's Crime, he'd keep more, except that Shaheen's hand's already empty, so Raven's Crime's not really relevant anymore.
Shaheen draws after the shuffle, and
he draws
he's
a
drawn a
land.
brick too.
Yep. So both players kind of just hitting each other back and forth. Brian for 3, Shaheen for 2. Shaheen's leading back 1 to block Snapcaster range. He realizes he's slightly on the wrong side of this race. So rather than racing 5 to 3, he's choosing to race, him dealing 3 and taking 5. He'd rather deal 2 and take 3, just kind of slow down the game.
And BVD uses the Wasteland on a Tundra.
Yep. Remember, one of the late game plans for BBD is to just loam the Wasteland every turn. So while it seems like Shaheen has all the mana he could ever hope for.
Another land drawn.
Another land for
Polluted
Soorani.
Delta.
So
So
really, it's
they're-
a race to who can draw something with the card first. I'm not sure if BBD has done it now.
They are both bricking here.
Yeah,
It's a
certain.
brickyard.
So we have
But the Creeping Tarpit continues to peck away.
Shaheen now at 9.
Shaheen.
It's only 3 more swings. Shaheen has left some number of Swords to Plowshares in, and yet another land from Brian. And he's going to, during draw step, V-click Shaheen. Shaheen drew a Cabal Therapy. I don't think Brian will take any of them.
No reason to here.
Don't want to give your opponent another draw. There's And none of his cards are good enough to turn in. A random card is probably better than any of those cards.
And now Shaheen's offense is going to be cut down even more. He has to keep 2 spirit tokens back. 1 for the V-Click, 1 for the Snapcaster. BVD does allow Shaheen to keep his cards. Oh, creeping Tar Pit. Closer and closer. Shaheen passes a turn with all his spirit tokens back. He's afraid of that Dark Blast or Abrupt Decay. So only the creeping Tar Pit gets in. Shaheen Soorani down to 6.
Soorani is yet another land. You can tell pretty dejected. He didn't even shuffle it in his hand. He played it and just dropped it on the table. And it looks like the whole 20 about to be done by creeping Tar Pit. Inquisition of Kozilek shows, sure, more stuff.
Takes the explosives. Tar Pit you to 3.
And
No
it's thought
answer.
seized by Shaheen Soorani. So wow, gets 7 draws, 10 draws if you count the brainstorm. Both players really drawing nothing there. So we'll be going to game 3. Shaheen Soorani, Braun, Duin. Typically the matchup a little more interesting than that, but there is a certain element in the matchup of land flood, I would say. Both decks are very reactive, and a lot of their reactive cards no good against the other player. So they, on top of having land draws, they have a lot of brick draws too, which are just we saw Shaheen there draw Cabal Therapy and Engineered Explosives. He was like, well, these are terrible. So
now he's going to take another look at his sideboard. Does he want to react to the creeping Tar Pit? Not really. That was a singleton. I don't think you want to game plan around that.
Yeah, he needs to have. He needs to be able to swords it. Probably, if games really do come down to that. It also looks like one thing, which maybe not noticed in the initial list, is that Brian's deck seems pretty ill-equipped to deal with Lingering Souls. He has Deathrite Shaman to exile them, but the actual just making, and the Midnight Haunting aspect of it is pretty hard for him to deal with.
Yeah, and Shaheen Soorani running 3 copies of Lingering Souls, not a card we've seen from the other Esper Stoneblade decks today.
I would seriously, I mean, this sounds silly. I'm wondering whether Brian's considering Engineered Plague. If the matchups truly are going this late, it's not it does answer all the copies of it.
Engineered Plague, naming spirits.
Yeah.
What do you do with the other ones if you draw them?
That's pretty bad.
Name core.
Put them back to Brainstorm.
I think
you name a Core Artificer. Either would work. I mean, it's terrible. You draw them, you hate yourself.
Yeah,
it's not a good answer to that.
Has an Engineered Plague ever named Core or Artificer? In the history of Magic the Gathering? Never.
Can't say that for sure. I don't know. Core seems... Well, no, there's got to be... What about Life? Remember when the Nomads on Core deck used to be a deck?
That's Encore. Those guys are different.
They're on Core? Aren't they still Core? They're still Core. They have Core in their name. They've got to be Core.
No. Probably. You're probably right.
Nomads on Core, because they're Core Nomad soldiers.
Core Nomad and soldiers?
Yeah, so what was it? On Core meant they were like friendly to the core, and ill core means they were evil core or something. And I think that's what the prefixes meant. Anyway,
I thought Encore just meant that they came back for another song.
They came back for another song. That's why I was things like, Trespasser, ill Vec, but Nomads Encores. The Encores were good guys.
That joke made me ill.
Oh.
Okay, enough joking around. None of this Engineered Plague nonsense.
I'm not joking around with at least one Engineered Plague. I might put in one Engineered Plague.
Okay.
That's a move
with all of the brainstorming and stuff.
Yeah,
it.
Maybe just the first. I think the second one is so awful that I wouldn't want to. But I will.
You'd never want to draw the second.
I will endorse putting one Engineered Plague in.
Okay. Maybe he did it. Maybe he's going to mulligan.
Yep. So Shaheen Soorani on the play, keeping a 7. Brian will go to 6. So unless Shaheen has a fast start with a Stoneforge Mystic, Brian, this isn't the worst for Brian. He'll have plenty of time to recover from a 6-card hand.
Oh, yeah. mulliganing in this kind of matchup is always correct. You want to make sure you have enough lands to execute your game plan.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want to do is keep some loose one land hand where you're hoping to get there.
And it's not even one land. Say Brian sticks on 3 lands, and then Shaheen just like plays lands all the way up to 7. That would put Shaheen so far ahead. You'd rather have too many lands than too few.
Yeah, all you want to do is keep playing lands, especially if they're creeping tar pits. My goodness.
We have a tweet from someone who apparently is playing Magic while watching our stream and says, "Just played an Engineered Plague, naming Artificer, just to have it done once." So, in the history of Magic, apparently it has been done. Just to answer your question.
Was he goldfishing? What?
I don't know. I don't know the story
They
about it. He
just,
says
like-
he heard you say that it had never been done. And he was playing games, so he just cast one and named Artificer. So now it's been done. Now your statement's not accurate.
Oh, why you guys? Okay.
We see a turn 1 Thoughtseize from Shaheen Soorani. Apologize for, yeah, there we go. It's Brian's hand. Let's get to see what the 6 he kept was. He's debating whether to Force of Will it, I think.
Shaheen.
That's gotta mean it's the only play he can be making. And there's no Force of Will. So Brainstorm, Jace, Snapcaster, and Shaheen takes the land.
No!
So, what a card that would be.
Wow. Shaheen here in the semifinals of the Legacy Open.
Thoughtseize is Brian's only land for the blowout.
Finding the comedic out here,
And so-
but now he's got to take it seriously.
Yeah, it's interesting. Brian probably, it depends if Shaheen has a way to deal with the other Brainstorm. He can either try to play a tempo game and take a Brainstorm from Brian and then, overwhelm him, or he can try to just make the play of taking Jace.
Yeah, taking one of the Jaces.
Because Jace is really good in this matchup.
Mhm.
All right,
So he takes the Brainstorm. He wants to try to go for the tempo.
and I like that play more because the thing is, Shaheen's hand looks like it's long on white cards, which means he'll have trouble playing that tempo game. Brian will likely be able to recover.
BVD drew a Misty Rainforest, so
That's really strong.
he's going to be able to get some value out of his Brainstorm. We'll see if Shaheen has some kind of counterspell for the Brainstorm.
Yeah, but
He's got a
he
Spell
drew a Spell
Pierce.
Pierce, but that I believe is a scrub land, so I don't think I'll be able to do it. I mean, you can't cast Brainstorm off scrub land either, so I don't know if he really had a choice.
Right, and he went for the
Okay. All right, so what? The
turn
big-
1 Thoughtseize, so yeah, he needed to play his Black Source out.
The bigger thing that he can do is he has a Vindicate, and the Vindicate he can use the Vindicate actually as a Stone Rain on top of that.
Wow.
And yep, he's gonna go Vindicate on the land.
Okay, so forcing Brian's hand to Brainstorm here. But Shaheen does not have Spell Pierce up, so Brainstorm's going to resolve, and Brian's going to be able to put 2 cards back and shuffle with Misty Rainforest. But it doesn't look like he found another land, I don't think.
I was unable to see whether he found it. so-
Vindicate resolves, Brainstorm is resolved. He has to crack the Misty Rainforest. There's no way he liked what he saw there.
The game here for Brian is just to find a land to make sure he continues to make land drops. Now, the other half of the puzzles, I believe Shaheen has a Jace at this point. Is that correct? I want to say he found one off that
Yes, I think
Brainstorm.
so.
So if Shaheen can get to, I might be corrected if he doesn't have it, but if he can get to the Jace, that will, surely be the game at this point. Brian with no counter spells. He has 2 counter spell proper in his deck, but not in his hand.
And there you go, no land.
If it's no land, he's gonna have to Brainstorm right here.
Did he draw another Brainstorm? Okay, he's got a
It's
land.
Wasteland. He's
It's a
gonna-
wasteland.
Thoughtseize and okay, there was no Mind Sculptor. There is a a bunch of reactive spells. It's an interesting choice between the 2 equipment, I think, for Brian, because the Sword of Feast and Famine, if Shaheen gets a creature down, will be very backbreaking for Brian. On the other hand, Batter Skull is a win con. Shaheen's 2 lands short of it.
What about the Spell Pierce?
I mean, Brian's a long way from casting Jace, and that's where Spell Pierce would go. I think it's the Sword of Feast and Famine, because, okay, he likes your play. He's going to go for Spell Pierce. So
Yeah, I don't like counter spells. I don't like having my game plan disrupted.
And now Shaheen now has drawn the Jace.
Let's Shaheen have the sword, which doesn't matter until a creature comes down.
Deathrite Shaman for Brian. And does he get there off the land? He's going to Thought Seize Bat. So no, he does not have the land. And we see a Liliana, a Deathrite Shaman, Jace, and Snapcaster Mage.
Ugh. So Deathrite Shaman, not a land, but it's a mana source here.
Remember, and this mana source, not a land. Snapcaster has the ability to Snapcast a Brainstorm thanks to Deathrite Shaman. So it's really a tight play here. I think, in the end, what Shaheen has to... I think he takes Snapcaster Mage, because if Snapcaster Mage comes into play, Brian will have enough creatures that Shaheen will not be able to slam down a Jace to win the game. The creatures will actually be able to attack Jace. So I think it has to be Snapcaster Mage.
This is a critical decision.
He's going to go for Deathrite Shaman, which is... Okay, I couldn't decide to sword's the Deathrite Shaman that's in play.
So
That's
taking away both of Brian's mana sources.
Right, just keep the pressure on. He's going to try to continue to mana deny Brian and hopefully be the first guy to play a Jace, but I'm not sure. Well, that's true now. And Brian has a window where he can either Snapcast a Brainstorm or he can make a Liliana.
Shaheen's down to what, 2 cards in hand?
The problem with Liliana is Brian doesn't want to plus Liliana. I think it's the Brainstorm as a result.
He wants the Jace.
Yeah, he wants the Snapcaster too. You know, if Shaheen makes a Jace here, it's not that powerful anymore, thanks to the fact that Brian now has a creature.
Alright, well here we go. This could be the brainstorm of Braun Duin's tournament. Looking for a 4th land to cast Jace the Mind Sculptor, Snapcaster, blue spell,
and the Mishra's Factory. So he does have a 4th land, and he does have double blue. He's going to set up for the Mind Sculptor next turn. Can Shaheen beat him to it? I think Shaheen's in a rough place either way, because if he plays his own Jace first... There we go. Land. Alright. He draws it Jace. And what's likely to be a Brainstorm. Difficult play. That last card in his hand is Batterskull. Yep. He's going to go ahead and Brainstorm. And Stoneforge Mystic. Inquisition of Kozilek. And I believe a 5th land. So excellent cards all around. There is no more equipment in Shaheen's deck, so that is a fetch land. So I'm not...
So you can put the Batterskull back,
right,
use the fetch land next turn to shuffle it away.
Yep, so
or just cast his Stoneforge Mystic next turn.
So Stoneforge is the card he wants most. He's not putting it in his hand in case Brian draws a targeted discard spell he's keeping. Alright, and Jace will be down to 1. And
so now Braun Duin holds on his own Jace because he's trying to attack the Jace down.
The thing that gives Shaheen another Brainstorm though.
And time to potentially set up defenses.
Yeah, Shaheen can make the play. The problem I have with that is Shaheen can make the play, Stoneforge, equip Sword even. Inquisition Brian.
So Braun Duin does have the Mishra's Factory, so even if Shaheen made a Stoneforge Mystic, Brian's got the attackers to double attack Jace past the Stoneforge.
Right. So the Inquisition play here, Shaheen is... Yeah, he knows about the... I believe he knows about the Liliana in Brian's hand. He doesn't know what else there is. Yeah, Liliana, Snapcaster Mage, and Counterspell. Sorry, not Liliana, Jace, Snapcaster Mage, Counterspell.
Well, take... takes the counterspell, leaving Brian with a Snapcaster and a Jace. And he momentarily thought about Fate Sealing. The Liliana that we saw previously in Brian's hand, I believe, got put back with the Brainstorm and shuffled away when Brian drew the 2 blue cards.
So,
Snapcaster and the Counterspell.
Snapcaster getting that Batterskull back again. Brian chooses to let that resolve. I'm surprised by that play.
Well, he doesn't have the Counterspell, and he
Oh,
doesn't
sorry,
have triple
because the
blue.
Counterspell's gone. Sorry. Yeah. So, that play draws.
Yeah, which is why Shaheen chose the Counterspell, because Brian doesn't have the triple blue to go Snapcaster Counterspell.
Right.
He still has not decided what to do with his Jace this turn. He decided to use the Stoneforge, getting Batterskull first.
I think
He's thinking over his play. Okay, I can block the Snapcaster, but I can't block the Mishra's Factory, so he still brainstorms.
Yeah.
Maybe hoping to find a Swords to Plowshares.
That was an interesting choice for him. The other option would have been for him to just plus the Jace. Giving it 3 counters, making it so it could survive next turn's attack.
Initially, he started to move the Jace up to 3 and reached for Brian's library, and then stopped. Changed his mind. So Shaheen brainstormed, hoping to find either another Stoneforge Mystic or Swords to Plowshares to defend Jace here. And instead he goes to equip Stoneforge with Sword of Feast and Famine, so he's going to force Brian to lose something if he wants to kill Jace.
Alright, and another Snapcast, the second Snapcaster in Brian's hand. Going to Snapcast a Brainstorm with the Wasteland up, so he has enough attackers to definitely battle down the Jace. So Shaheen's done this transition where he's gone from a protect the Jace game into a conceding, alright, you win this Jace war, but I get Stoneforge and all of the toys that come with it, and now you're gonna have to deal with it.
And he's gonna go aggressive.
Yep. And where he can make plays such as pre-combat Batterskull swing, attempt to untap all his lands. Yeah, a lot of good plays here. His biggest worry is that there's still the Jace in Brian's hand, and that's going to be Brian's best weapon to stop the equipment fight.
Okay, so Brian's gonna go with both Snapcasters here. He's gonna lose one of them, but trades it with a Jace the Mind Sculptor, plays his own.
Jace. And he's gonna, Shaheen knows he's kind of in a bad spot. Jace unsummons the Stoneforge Mystic, and Shaheen now left without really many plays.
Yeah, but that's really what he had to do, because he knew that Brian had another Snapcaster in hand, so he couldn't go the Fate Seal route.
He just drew Surgical Extraction. Kind of a card he uses to leverage in a control matchup. I don't know if there's a Jace in the yard. Still, that'd be pretty ironic that the Jace finally resolved.
Okay, here we go. Lingering Souls, getting probably 2 tokens and a Stoneforge.
Yeah, it's 2. Yeah, he has to be between 2 tokens and a Stoneforge, 2 tokens and an Equip. 2 or 4 tokens. The Equip, because of Jace, the Equip is probably the wrong
you don't want to
play.
equip.
He's debating here, yeah. My hunch is that I don't like the Stoneforge play. It doesn't have anything to find here. Okay, the Stoneforge play sets up a Batterskull, so...
But the Flashback Souls play threatens the Jace.
Yep, it is slightly...
Even through a Fate Seal.
Yep, I think what's more important, what Shaheen has decided is more important, is to have this late game threat. He wants to make sure Stoneforge resolves, because the pairing of Stoneforge and Batterskull is kind of, that's his plan for winning the late game. So while he has this window, I think Shaheen decided he wanted to resolve Stoneforge. It makes the board a little bit weaker here, but not so weak that he can't win. At least now when he does it this way, he has his best threat on the board.
Right.
As we see Brian draw and drew and kept an Inquisition Kozilek, which would have taken Stoneforge had Shaheen not played it.
And with the Sword of Feast and Famine, he could still equip and threaten the Jace.
Right. So, I think, a pretty heads-up play by Shaheen Soorani.
Another Mishra's Factory for BBD.
Yep. Worthy of noting, if he gets a third Mishra's Factory, which he plays, and that's a one of Maelstrom Pulse. If he gets a third Mishra's Factory, his factories will be able to defeat sword-equipped creatures in combat on the attack. Right now, already on the block, they're able to do that.
So, Shaheen, rewarded for his heads-up play, still has a threat on board.
Yeah, biggest problem is that every turn he doesn't kill that Jace is another Brainstorm for Braun Duin, which I can't underestimate just how much advantage that actually is.
And he's gonna have to equip.
Yeah, well, he's got an equip and a flashback, both of which he really wants to have happen this turn. Also in his hand is Surgical, a Batter Skull.
So he flashes back Lingering Souls first.
Yep. Deciding which hand I'm going to go with the SCG tokens. So we have, yep, those guys still threatening to remove Jace. But, once again, Brian will get a third Brainstorm off this Mind Sculptor. And I can say I can almost count on one hand the number of games where a player has gotten 3 Brainstorms and lost the game with Jace. It's very rare that you lose after getting so many activations.
That's funny, because that's exactly what Drew Levin said when he was here in the booth with me. He said, 3 Brainstorms off of Jace, you might as well scoop.
Which one?
Which germ should I play?
I think when he first put his own spirit tokens into play, that someone suggested to use the SCG ones in time. This time he pulled in the SCG box and found an identical germ token. So Liliana drawn by Jace. I mean, this is the thing. Brian now has a 6-card hand, soon to be a 7-card hand thanks to Jace.
Yeah, so even if Shaheen finally takes out Jace, the advantage gained off these Brainstorms, Brian is going to be able to set up kind of the next stage of his plan.
So those of you guys remember, we missed game 1 of this match, this thrilling matchup.
There's that creeping tar pit again.
So this is only the second game of this matchup we've seen.
Inquisition
takes a really strong here, takes Snapcaster Mage. And remember, it's not really the Inquisitions. This is the Jace winning the game right now. Braun Duin, well, having both Mishra's Factories up so that he can block anything that's not Batter Skull. But he doesn't have, despite all his card draw, he doesn't really have Batter Skull under control yet.
Right. So it seems like the spirit tokens are going to take out Jace here finally.
Yeah, there was a 1 Maelstrom Pulse in Braun Duin's board, but he already used that on spirit tokens. As a result, his main deck does not have any onboard removal spells for Batter Skull. The way he tries to remove it is by forcing Shaheen into a situation where Shaheen has to bounce it and recast it for a germ, and then counter it. So there's a couple of problems with that. The first is that Shaheen's never going to cast the thing to Stoneforge Mystic. The second is that involves killing 4 creatures right now. So this you really can't undersell just how important this Batter Skull is in Shaheen's plan for winning.
So Shaheen ponders.
2 tokens at Jace and a giant 6/6 lifelinker at Brian.
So he's gonna force Brian to chump block the germ equipped with Batter Skull and sort of Feast and Famine here.
Yeah, and
doesn't want to give Shaheen that untap.
So this may be one of those situations where 3 Brainstorms actually wasn't enough. There's somewhat of a trump here in the board situation Shaheen's set up. I think through patience he was able just to kind of count out the number of ways that Brian could deal with this Batter Skull and slowly, one by one, watch them go to other places, and then was able to establish this board. And suddenly the board looks very lonely for Brian.
Surgical Extraction on Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Right. And this turnaround, especially, Shaheen gained 6 lifelink off the germ token. Almost, did pretty much the match here.
And manages to catch a Jace in Brian's hand as well.
And I find it so interesting how these games go from being so close to suddenly just over. I think we really saw it here once the Batter Skull finally hit play.
Yeah, it's the life gain. It's kind of incidental life gain of the Matter Skull. Can keep you in games at times, and now just a giant attacker. 6/6 Germ.
Yeah, Brian's deck with so few ways to answer it. Liliana's in play. Yeah, Brian.
Shaheen counterspell on the Liliana. Brian ships the turn back.
Yeah, she didn't turn back, but Brian, no cards in hand. Just a turn ago, he had a full grip. Now down to 0, and Shaheen with all the cards.
So Shaheen's probably gonna move the Sword of Feast and Famine to one of his spirits so that he can make sure to connect with it past the Mishra's factories. No, thinks about it. What is he doing? He's probably counting damage up. There he goes. He goes to equip. 2 Mishra's factories as blockers are available. So just attacks with the spirits and the Batter Skull. So Brian can't really do much. I mean, he can trade 2 Mishra's factories for a Germ. That's not going to do much. Brian cannot block the spirit tokens, so Sword of Feast and Famine is going to connect, and he says, "I'll take it all." That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 damage.
And what I've really been impressed here when watching this game fold out is how Shaheen was so seamlessly able to transition the game between a Jace war suddenly into an equipment war. You know, he really just recognized the turn at which suddenly this match wasn't about Jace anymore. Let Brian win the Jace war, won anyway.
Yeah,
and
wow.
That's, you know, that really takes some heads-up play to do there.
And Brian resolves the
Edict.
Liliana, edicts.
Probably will grab the spirit token. You know, it
Well,
doesn't really matter.
He wants to count the damage and see if
he
he
can
can just
he
equip
can just-
the Batter Skull.
Oh, he can just sack the germ token and then on end step cycle, end step bounce and recast Stoneforge.
Yeah,
It's
that's what he
That's the
chooses.
best play. Because yeah, 5 mana. Oops, here it goes again. There we go. So you didn't sacrifice anything. And on the attack, that should be lethal.
He's 1 damage short of killing in the air.
Well, if just everything goes at Brian. Oh yeah, there's blockers.
He's
There's
chump blocks with
okay.
Mishra's Factory, which you might as well be dead, but
Always worth it to play it out.
at this point, sure. You've been playing for
75 minutes.
74
Let's make it more. So, Shaheen untap. He's gonna pre-combat move that Batter Skull over to
so
a
he
flyer.
wants to maximize his flying damage.
Yep. Funny, I like that. Though he decided on that play, he cycled the end step Batter Skull anyway, as opposed to just sacrificing the.
Hey yo, that has vigilance.
Vigilance, yeah. Untap that creature, and the 1/1 goes at Liliana, and
Okay,
swinging
so
for 7 life
damage.
Untapping all his lands, and passing turn. Just looking to see a concession here.
No, draw your card.
Draw the card. Draw a card. It might be an out. It wasn't. Okay.
Attack with the Peeping Tar Pit.
Yes!
I told you.
Brian now at
Oh,
2
no.
from the attack. He's going to thought seize himself to deal the final 2 damage. He's going to, the honorable way, is going to
That's the honorable way?
He's not going to let anyone else end the game. So, Shaheen Soorani in an epic slugfest, 2-1, defeats Braun, Duin, and we'll move on to the finals against, for those of you who remember, actually this was only a semifinal. Daniel Signori.
No, that was the finals.
Yeah, Daniel Signori had
Okay.
won, just about an hour ago, he finished his match.
Right, so he's been sitting around, maybe even went and got something
He
to eat.
got dinner, watched a movie, and was going to come back for the finals. All right, so we're going to bring this back into the booth.